I recognise, though, given the situation, I cannot deliver the mandate on which I was elected by the Conservative Party.
Welcome to WatchMojoUK, and today we'll be counting down our picks for the 10 biggest failures in British politics.
Before we begin, we publish new content every day, so be sure to subscribe to our channel and ring the bell to get notified about our latest videos.
For this list, we're looking at the most embarrassing and unpleasant failures to strike Westminster.
We made a pledge, we didn't stick to it, and for that I'm sorry.
Let us know in the comments what you think of these issues. Number 10, Boris resigns.
It is clearly now the will of the Parliamentary Conservative Party that there should be a new leader of that party and therefore a new Prime Minister.
His entire premiership was marred with scandal and failure, from his handling of the pandemic to his appointment of Chris Pincher. But his resignation was a failure not just for Johnson, but also for the Tory party itself, which has proceeded to eat itself alive since he left.
And the reason I have fought so hard in the last few days to continue to deliver that mandate in person was not just because I wanted to do so, but because I felt it was my job.
He lost control of Tory MPs so thoroughly that nearly 60 of them resigned over the course of 2 days, leaving him unable to command the authority of Commons.
And in the last few days I've tried to persuade my colleagues that it would be eccentric to change governments when we're delivering so much.
What followed was a 2-month-long leadership election in which he refused to do anything to address the cost of living crisis, and then the disastrous installation of Liz Truss. Boris Johnson even threatened to return to Downing Street mere weeks after he left. Number 9. The Suez Crisis. The big failure of Anthony Eden's political career, the Suez Crisis saw Britain and France try to subtly back an Israeli invasion of Egypt, all to seize control of the Suez Canal, a vital trade route between the Mediterranean and Red Seas. Britain and France also joined the invasion until they got a stern telling off from the US, USSR, and the UN. Egypt maintained control of the Suez Canal, and Britain and France were left with egg on their faces, both becoming laughingstocks internationally after being warned time and time again not to invade Egypt. Anthony Eden resigned in disgrace. Number 8. ASBOs.
Back then it was seen as a way of nipping in the bud those small-scale crimes committed on estates like this one.
One of Tony Blair's pledges as Prime Minister was that he was going to be tough on crime, and one of the biggest things he gave to Britain's justice system was the humble ASBO, Anti-Social Behaviour Order. But did the ASBOs work? Well, by most analysis, no.
Big issues here: vandalism, drugs, late-night drinking and fighting.
By the time the coalition took over Whitehall, they decided they were going to ditch the ASBOs entirely, because they were a nightmare to enforce and the order conditions were constantly violated.
Those at the sharp end of reducing antisocial behaviour have doubts about the new government reforms.
They were expensive, time-consuming, and ultimately accomplished little. And while they could be given out for worthier crimes like vandalism, you could also get landed with an ASBO for simple rudeness. Number 7. The Brexit referendum.
It was here in Sunderland, shortly after midnight, that the scale of the revolt against our EU membership started to become clear.
After 5 years of the coalition, David Cameron wanted to get a proper Tory majority in 2015. One way he accomplished this was by promising Britain's far right and UKIP a referendum on the UK's membership of the European Union.
The British people have voted to leave the European Union, and their will must be respected.
Cameron himself was a Remainer, and clearly thought the referendum would come out in his favour, making it a risk-free option to court UKIP's voter base. However, as we all know, this isn't what happened.
But I do not think it would be right for me to try to be the captain that steers our country to its next destination.
Leave won, and Cameron immediately resigned, leaving it to his successor, Theresa May, also a Remainer, to negotiate a Brexit deal, something she wasn't particularly good at. Number 6. The expenses scandal. In 2009, it came out that MPs from both sides of the House had been claiming for things on their expenses that they definitely shouldn't have been.
When the Freedom of Information Act came in, when Tony Blair passed it, that offered a chance for the lid to be lifted on how MPs were really being paid.
As public servants, their salaries are paid by the taxpayer, as are their expenses. Some business-related expenses are normal, but it was found that many MPs were taking the piss.
We had every MP's private address, bank details, we had everything. We were literally inside their private lives.
MPs who owned more than 2 homes would often change their second home designation to continue to claim back mortgages and repairs.
So we started with the Cabinet. Of course, Gordon Brown was Prime Minister, he was on the front page. Then we went through the Cabinet on the inside of the pages.
As well as that, some of the other alleged expenses that came out included John Prescott claiming to have wooden beams added to his home, multiple Tories claiming for swimming pool maintenance, and Douglas Hogg claiming to have his moat cleaned. Number 5. Tuition fees.
But I also meet people who are disappointed and angry that we couldn't keep all our promises.
Under Nick Clegg, the Lib Dems saw a surge in popularity in the 2010 election, and one of his biggest campaign promises was that he'd abolish tuition fees. However, when he actually got into power as David Cameron's deputy PM, not only did he not abolish tuition fees, but he let the Tories raise them to £9,000.
We made a promise before the election that we would vote against any rise in fees under any circumstances. But that was a mistake.
He worked under the assumption that that was the maximum universities could charge, and they didn't need to charge that much. However, almost immediately, unis revised their fees and did, by and large, decide to charge the maximum amount possible.
You know, just last week, a report from the London School of Economics says Britain's poorest families have suffered most under the coalition. So did you lose the fight for fairness in coalition?
The Lib Dems' reputation still hasn't recovered, and for years, students have been plunged into massive amounts of debt. Number 4. The Rwanda programme.
Those who travel to the UK by illegal and dangerous routes, including by small boats across the Channel, may be relocated to Rwanda, where they will have their asylum claims considered.
In 2022, Boris Johnson and Priti Patel, still Home Secretary at the time, revealed a plan that rather than let the UK's asylum seekers apply for asylum here, they were going to deport them to Rwanda.
But the government wants to stop people reaching the UK illegally, and the plan to fly some arrivals 4,000 miles to Rwanda is part of that.
The first scheduled flight of the Rwanda programme in summer was blocked by the European Court of Human Rights, not to mention facing opposition from the UN. Not only is it widely viewed as completely inhumane amongst the British public, but it's also not cheap.
I do not support the removal to Rwanda policy on the grounds of legality, practicality and efficacy.
The UK pledged to pay £120 million to Rwanda up front, and then also stump up as much as £30,000 for every person sent there. The government has also been unable to find willing airlines to do the job. Number 3. Prevent.
From my experience, I feel that the prevent strategy can push people toward radicalisation instead of pushing them away from it.
Set up in 2003, the Prevent programme has long been touted as one of the UK's best weapons against terrorism. But over the years, many inquiries and reports have found that Prevent just doesn't work.
I think the prevent strategy is state Islamophobia, nothing short of that.
Many perpetrators of extremist violence in the UK in recent years were known to Prevent, while others were known to British authorities but weren't referred to Prevent at all. As well as not stopping attacks, UK counter-terrorism has also been found to fuel division in Muslim communities and erode trust.
So the investigation was taking place purely on the fact that my name is Mohammed. I look the way I do and I'm Muslim, and that's the only thing that I can put it down to.
It's also been unprepared for other types of extremism, like violent operators from the far right. And finally, it's being criticised as an excuse to bring mass surveillance to the UK and not remotely fit for purpose.
It soon became clear that Prevent was being used as a means of spying on people, and as a result of it, a lot of people stopped cooperating with it.
Number 2. The mini-budget. Mere weeks after Liz Truss took over from Boris Johnson, the country was plunged into further chaos following Kwasi Kwarteng's announcement of the mini-budget.
What I would say is we are facing very, very difficult economic times at the moment. That is why the government has acted.
The budget called for tens of billions of pounds of tax cuts, all funded by massive government borrowing, spooking the markets.
I don't agree with that statement because we are facing a difficult global economic situation.
The pound crashed to its lowest ever level, mortgage rates increased dramatically, pensions were threatened, and even bankers were opposed.
I came into office at a time of great economic and international instability.
Despite a slew of U-turns and the sacking of Kwarteng, Truss too was forced to resign, staying in Downing Street for only 50 days in total, after it came out that her frontbenchers had been physically threatening people to get them to vote in favour of fracking.
I have therefore spoken to His Majesty the King to notify him that I am resigning as leader of the Conservative Party.
Number 1. Poll tax. The downfall of Thatcher's administration. Poll tax was one of the biggest controversies any British government has had to face.
Ladies and gentlemen, we're leaving Downing Street for the last time after 11.5 wonderful years.
A non-means tested additional tax was despised by the public as it saw people in all income brackets charged a flat rate to fund local authorities. It eventually reappeared as modern council tax, with properties taxed in accordance with how much they were worth, because Thatcher's original poll tax idea was so unpopular. 1990 saw many protests against it turn into riots, with so many attendees that some police forces said arresting them all would be impossible. Rather than U-turn, Thatcher resigned, and it was left to John Major to undo the damage.
The latest stage of a meteoric rise for John Major in national politics, raw backbencher to Prime Minister.
Do you agree with our picks? Check out this other recent clip from WatchMojoUK and be sure to subscribe and ring the bell to be notified about our latest videos.